Are you having an issue with your condensate pump attached to your furnace, air conditioner, or tankless water heater? If you are, stay tuned. We're going to walk through the process of trying to diagnose the source of the problem, figure out if it's fixable, and if it's not, determine if you have to buy a new unit. To start off, we're looking at a little giant pump, model number VCMA-15ULS. This also applies to the bigger model, which is the VCMA-20ULS. Just to give you an idea, this pump runs a little over $40 on Amazon, as well as the larger 20 model. The only main difference between the two is the gallons per hour that these can pump. This can pump 65 gallons per hour, and I believe 15 feet of rise, and the larger 20 model can pump 80 gallons per hour at, I believe, 20 feet of rise. If you're wondering which unit to go with, I would just go with the larger unit. You'll probably have to run it less. It'll put less strain on the motor. It'll likely last longer. And if it was to have any restricted flow, with the extra power, it would probably push through a little better. In my case, the condensate pump is attached to the furnace and air conditioner. This is to remove the water that comes from both the case coil and the furnace when heating the air. We recently had a 90-degree heat wave over the past 3 days, so we initially turned on the system, went to bed. Following morning when we woke up, we noticed a large puddle of water around and near the furnace. That was a little alarming, so we're like, is that an issue with the condensate pump, or is that an issue with the refrigerant, and potentially the refrigerant lines in the case coil are freezing? So to start off, what I did is I took some water bottles, filled them up, for example, something like this, and I poured it in one of these openings, which is going to fill the black reservoir underneath. Once that reservoir fills, there should be 2 floats in there, and as they rise, it will kick on the pump and pump the water out. So when I filled up those holes, the pump did turn on, so I know the floats were functioning and the switches were functioning. However, when the pump turned on, it ran for about 10 or 15 minutes and it really didn't seem to get all the water out, so it was a little concerning. Next, with it unplugged, I removed the clear rubber tubing that was attached to the check valve right here. All I did was pull it off. There are some ribs on there to hold the tubing on, but as you just pull and kind of twist, it'll pop off. If you don't want to disconnect it, what you want to do is put like a tray or a bucket or something underneath to catch the water when you're trying to diagnose the problem. Make sure you plug this into a GFCI protected outlet. With that disconnected and a tray underneath ideally, you should then be able to see if the pump kicks on and shoots water out this check valve. In my case, the water was just dribbling out. So very minimal water was coming at all, and it really just ran and ran and ran and ran. So I wasn't sure if the pump was bad, check valve was bad, something was clogged. So that's where we took it apart, removed it from the furnace, and now we're outside taking a look at it more. If your pump wasn't turning on at all when you filled up the reservoir with water, there's a little indentation right here where you can stick your nail or a flathead screwdriver and pick up the pump and remove it from the reservoir. When you remove the pump, you want to make sure both of these floats are moving freely, and you can also hear that clicking noise. If either of these are sticking or this is filled with water, that is going to be the source of your problem. More than likely, you're going to want to get a new unit because it's going to be difficult to service this. I mean, you could try cleaning it, and if you have a hole in here, there's really not much you can do. Also, you're going to take a look at all these intake vents. Make sure these are clean. If they're not, you're going to need to clean these out with a flathead screwdriver or something similar. You want to spray some water with a garden hose. Make sure to try and keep the water outside of this compartment up here, because this is where the actual electrical parts are. As you know, this is a submersible pump, so this is able to get wet in here. Next, we're going to look at this, which is going to be the tube going up to the check valve, or the check valve itself. Or it could be possible the pump is failing itself, or there's some other issue with it being clogged internally. So I'm going to fill the reservoir with water. In my case, when I previously removed this reservoir, it was caked with metal, rusty filings and shavings. In that case, make sure you dump it, clean it fully, and also make sure that none of that is stuck in the actual pump itself. Any of that could clog it up or cause an issue or premature wear. With the reservoir filled, you're now going to put your pump right back in place. It should click right in. At this point, you plug it in and see if any water comes out of the check valve located right there. In my case, the water is just dribbling out of the check valve. So if I plug it into a GFCI protected outlet, you see the water just barely comes out. So I'm pretty certain that the check valve is bad and needs to be replaced. If the water is dribbling out or not coming out of the check valve at all, you're going to want to remove it using a 9/16 deep socket. And likely you're going to want to use an extension to make your life easier on your socket and ratchet set. Place your socket over your check valve. Turn it counterclockwise. Take your check valve out. Notice there is an O-ring on here. Make sure it comes off. It's not damaged or has an issue, otherwise it could leak from around here. Also, when I initially took this off, the O-ring was still seated in here, so you're going to remove that and put it back on the threads of your check valve. I recommend using a Q-tip or something similar to push and press in the bottom of the check valve. You're going to want to stick it in there, spin it around, pull it out. Make sure that you're not getting any gunk out of there. If you are, then there could be something with it being clogged up. So you're going to press, move it back and forth, spin it around for a while. You're probably going to use a couple of these. As you press in there, you're going to press firmly because that's where the check valve is. You want to make sure that that's moving freely. It's possible that could be seized up, and that's preventing the water flow from exiting the check valve. With the check valve removed, you want to now plug in your pump with the reservoir filled into a GFCI protected outlet. Obviously you're dealing with water here, you want to make sure you're safe. So when you plug it in, you'll be able to see if the water comes out of that hole right there where the check valve was installed freely. If it comes out like a fountain, then you know the issue is with your check valve. So in my case, you can see the water was coming out like a fountain. The issue is not with the pump. Obviously in here, that is clear, the pump is clear, and it's turning on when the floats are rising, so everything with the pump is fine. I've now isolated the problem now to my check valve. So my check valve either needs to be replaced or cleaned. And this part is about $8 on Amazon, so you're better off just replacing it. But if you need something immediately before you get a new part, then go ahead, stick a Q-tip in there, try and clean it out, or even like a paper clip. And it might get enough water going through there until you can replace it. If you happen to have any pool and spa lube, which is a silicone lubricant, you can use that on your check valve. What I would do is put a little on the end of your Q-tip, stick it in the rear of the check valve, and rub it around. This will help lubricate it. If it's stuck or getting stuck or not moving freely, that might help it at least permanently or until you get the new check valve. Open it up, put a bunch on your Q-tip, and now insert that into the bottom of your check valve with the threads. And then you're just going to keep moving it around, working it, spinning it. So I'm going to use a paper clip as well, and I'm actually going to go from the top and the bottom. I'm going to be moving this around, pressing down around the corners mainly, and I felt something moving, so I'm just going to keep doing that. Reinstall it by hand using your fingers. Tighten it down, finger tight. It's probably really all you need, but if you are going to use a socket, just snug it up so it compresses the O-ring. Do not do it too tight, just lightly snug it. Pop off your reservoir. Now to test it out, you're going to plug it into a GFCI protected outlet, and let's see what happens. Alright, we are good. We have fixed the check valve, and it's flowing as we would expect it to. So folks, if you have a condensate pump that failed, and you want to try and repair it, whether it be the check valve or the pump itself, these are the steps to diagnose it, service it, fix it yourself. Worst comes to worst and you can't get that check valve to work, go ahead and replace it. I'm going to buy a new one, keep it on hand, or just replace it proactively because I don't know if like the insides of this are starting to deteriorate or fail, and I don't want to be stuck without it again. But you can see my pump fully removed all the water within a matter of seconds, and now it turned off, the pump isn't running, and it's ready to go. So if your pump is now pumping water through the check valve freely, you still could have one more issue. For example, if you're pumping water and then all of a sudden it stops and then the water fills back up from the tube where it's pumping it out and then turns back on pretty quickly, you know the check valve isn't working correctly. It's allowing the water in that clear tube attached to the outlet to come back into the actual reservoir, fill it back up, turn it back on. So if it's a constant cycle where it's turning on, turning off, turning on, turning off much quicker than expected, you know you have an issue with the check valve, and you either need to keep playing with it to try and fix it, or it's actually bad. At that point, probably better just to replace it for the $8. Screw in a new one, you'll be good to go. Hope you guys found this video helpful. Thanks guys, have a good day.